5 beautiful girls on the run find shelter with an old rancher who had long turned his back on the world. Armed men are closing in, ready to do whatever it takes. But Thaddeus Hartwell, in the dust and fire, never goes down without a fight. Thaddeus Hartwell hadn't spoken to another soul in 4 winters. Not since the day the world took his wife and child beneath a blanket of fevered sweat and silence. He buried them under a lone cedar tree on the north ridge of his land, carved their names into a crooked piece of driftwood, and let the wind and coyotes howl the eulogy. Folks in town whispered about the old Hartwell Ranch, tucked into the high mesa country between Canyon Diablo and the Red Peaks. Said it was haunted, either by grief or ghosts, no one could say for sure. But everyone agreed. Thaddeus Hartwell wanted to be left alone. And for 4 long years, that's how it stayed. That is, until the day 5 shadows appeared at sundown, silhouetted against the dying fire of the Arizona sky, kneeling at the edge of his ranch fence like outlaws at a chapel. They were women. Girls, really. None older than 22, none younger than 15. Clothes torn, hair tangled by wind and dust. They looked like they'd ridden from hell itself and barely escaped with breath in their lungs. Thaddeus saw them from the porch, rifle in hand, the familiar chill crawling up his spine. He didn't move. Not yet. The eldest rose slowly, her voice ragged and low. "Mister, we ain't here to rob or beg. We just need shelter. Just one night. Please." Thaddeus said nothing. She stepped forward and dropped to her knees again, the other 4 following suit. Silent and solemn. There was something ceremonial in it, like they knew this wasn't just asking for shelter. It was something more, something heavier. Thaddeus's trigger finger twitched. Why 5 girls? Why now? And what were they running from that was worse than an old man with a Winchester? Behind them, the wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of smoke, and something else. Gunpowder. He finally spoke, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "Get up off your knees and tell me the truth, girl. Who's hunting you?" The oldest looked up, and the look in her eyes made him wish he hadn't asked. Thaddeus stepped off the porch, boots creaking on dry wood, rifle still loose in his grip but not yet aimed. The girl, tall, sharp-jawed, and sunburned, rose to her feet again. Her eyes weren't afraid, just tired. "Name's Cora," she said. "These are my sisters, Hattie, Rose, Lila, and little Ellie." Her voice cracked on the last name. "We been riding near 2 days. No food, no sleep, just wind, dust, and men who mean to see us dead." Thaddeus's brow furrowed. "Who?" Cora hesitated, eyes shifting west toward the horizon. "They ain't lawmen, but they wear the coats. Pinkerton cutthroats, most likely. Sent after our pa. But they didn't find him. Just us. Pinkertons. Even out here, Thaddeus knew that name. Mercenaries dressed like gentlemen, teeth like wolves. If 5 girls were running from Pinkertons, then someone back east had paid a great deal of money to make them disappear. Thaddeus looked toward the old barn. It still had dry hay and a locked door, but opening it would mean something. A choice. Hattie, the second eldest, stepped forward. "We won't stay if it means harm to you. We'll ride on." Thaddeus raised a hand. "No one's riding anywhere tonight," he said gruffly. "Not with smoke on the wind and blood in the air." He motioned toward the barn. "Go on." "Before I change my mind." They didn't question it, just nodded, and led their weary limbs through the gate. Ellie, the youngest, looked back at him. She smiled. A little thing. Thaddeus Hartwell hadn't seen a smile in years. But when the gate closed behind them, and the wind howled again from the ridge, he turned his eyes westward. Smoke, and 5 riders, just barely visible, cresting the mesa. He muttered under his breath, "Lord help me. What have I just brought to my doorstep?" Thaddeus Hartwell watched the 5 riders like a man watching thunderclouds roll over dry brush. They weren't in a hurry, but they weren't wandering either. They rode with the patience of men who already knew where their prey had gone. Cora's words echoed in his head. Pinkerton men. But these weren't bounty hunters or lawmen. Thaddeus could feel it in his gut. These were wolves in Sunday suits. He moved quick, old instincts stirring like coals under wind. Into the cabin he went, lighting the lantern low. He knelt by a loose floorboard beneath the hearth, pulled it up, and retrieved a worn leather satchel. Inside lay a Colt .44 revolver, 6 rounds already loaded. The metal was cold as guilt. He hadn't fired a gun in years. A soft knock came at the door. It was Cora. "They're coming, aren't they?" Thaddeus nodded, eyes never leaving the ridge. "5 of them. Maybe more in the trees." She stepped in, closing the door behind her. "They won't stop. They killed my uncle near Flagstaff, shot our mule outside Winslow. We've been running since Colorado." Thaddeus gave her a sharp glance. "Why?" Cora hesitated. "Because our pa found out who was really behind the railroad killings in Silver Basin. Said he had names, dates, evidence. Then he vanished. Next thing we knew, they were after us." Thaddeus's heart sank. Railroad killings, land disputes, rail barons, dead ranchers. That tale had blood all over it. And these girls weren't just runaways. They were witnesses. Thaddeus holstered the Colt and shut the lantern. "You told me you didn't want to bring harm to my land," he said, voice low. "But harm already found you." Outside, the wind picked up again. Cora looked him dead in the eye. "We didn't ask to be part of this." "I know," Thaddeus said, tightening the rifle sling over his shoulder. "But now we are." From the barn, a child's scream tore through the dark, followed by a single gunshot. Thaddeus's heart seized as the crack of the gunshot echoed through the valley. He bolted from the cabin like a wild dog off the chain, rifle raised, legs thundering over dry dirt. Cora was right behind him, boots skidding on gravel, her breath shallow with panic. The barn loomed ahead, half lit by the sinking sun, a crooked silhouette against a blood-orange sky. Smoke curled faintly from the loft, just enough to turn Thaddeus's stomach. He kicked the barn door open. Inside, chaos. Lila was crouched beside Ellie, who clutched her shoulder, blood staining the torn hem of her sleeve. Hattie and Rose had dragged hay bales to barricade the back wall. A broken lantern lay in the straw, fire licking dangerously close to the rafters. And standing dead center in the barn, holding a pistol still warm with powder, was a man Thaddeus hadn't seen in 12 years. "Luther Pike," Thaddeus growled. Pike turned, lips curled in that same snake's grin Thaddeus remembered from the war. He was older now, dressed cleaner, but his eyes were still as dead as the men he used to leave behind. "Well, I'll be," Pike drawled. "Didn't expect to find you out here, Hartwell. Thought you'd drunk yourself into a grave by now." Cora's face turned pale. "You know this man?" "Too well," Thaddeus muttered. Pike cocked his head. "Got myself a contract. 5 girls. Alive if possible. But they didn't say nothing about taking them without bruises." Ellie whimpered. Thaddeus raised his rifle. Pike didn't flinch. "You gonna shoot me, Hartwell? In front of all these little darlings? I remember you had a problem with that kind of thing. Back at Rattlesnake Ridge, wasn't that your boy's birthday?" Something in Thaddeus broke. The barn exploded with the sound of thunder. The blast from Thaddeus's rifle filled the barn with fire and thunder. Luther Pike staggered backward, his grin wiped clean by a red blossom spreading across his chest. His pistol slipped from his fingers, clattering to the dirt floor like a rattlesnake without a head. He fell into the hay without a word, no last curse, no dying breath, just silence. Smoke curled from the muzzle of Thaddeus's rifle as he lowered it, the weight of 12 years crashing down all at once. His hands shook, not from the shot, but from what it meant. He was back. Hattie scrambled to Ellie's side, pressing cloth to the little girl's bleeding arm. "It's a graze," she said breathlessly. "She'll live." Cora looked from the corpse to Thaddeus, then back again. "Who was he to you?" Thaddeus didn't answer at first. He turned and walked to the barn door, staring into the trees beyond the fence line. "He was the last man I ever trusted," he said finally. "We rode together in the war. Afterward, we took contracts for the railroad, until he started taking the wrong kind of pay. I turned him in, and he came back," Cora said softly. Thaddeus nodded. "They always do." Outside, the sky had turned to ash, stars just beginning to prick the heavens. But Thaddeus saw something else out there, in the darkening hills. 2 flickers of lantern light. Then 3. Then 4. More riders. Pike hadn't come alone. Thaddeus turned back to the girls, eyes like steel. "Get what you need. And lock the barn tight. We've got half an hour, maybe less, before his friends come looking. "And if they find him?" Lila asked, her voice trembling. Thaddeus didn't blink. "Then we give them something to find." Thaddeus moved like a man reborn, setting traps, loading rifles, and unrolling an oilskin bundle of tools he hadn't touched since the Confederacy folded into dust. The barn, the house, the whole damn ranch. Every nail, beam, and broken hinge was about to earn its keep. Inside the cabin, Cora wrapped Ellie's shoulder tight with torn cotton, whispering soft things while her hands worked steady. Hattie watched from the window, tracking the lanterns in the distance like a hawk. "They're fanning out," she murmured, "hunting slow." "They don't know Pike is dead yet," Thaddeus said, reloading his Colt. Cora stood. "What if they don't come tonight?" "They will. Men like that don't sleep while a bounty's loose." Thaddeus turned to the girls, his voice low and sharp. "You've got 5 minutes to decide something. Hide and hope, or stand and fight." Lila looked at him, eyes wide. "We can't shoot. We don't even know how." Thaddeus grabbed a second rifle from the wall, handed it to Cora. "Then, you're gonna learn quick." She took it. Didn't flinch. Didn't ask questions. He admired that. Thunder rumbled in the east. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet mesquite and gun oil. Thaddeus stepped out onto the porch, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other. "Why are you helping us?" Rose asked from behind. He didn't look back. "Because the last time I stayed quiet, good people died. And I promised my wife I wouldn't let that happen again." From the darkness came a shout. "Hartwell! We know you're out there. Send out the girls and we'll let you live." Thaddeus's jaw tightened. "Boys," he muttered, "you picked the wrong porch." The air was thick with tension as Thaddeus stepped off the porch, each bootfall crunching against dry earth like the ticking of a clock winding down. The voice that called out was close now, too close. Cora and Hattie flanked the cabin windows, rifles steady, hands shaking just enough to betray how new they were to this kind of standoff. Rose and Lila crouched low in the barn with Ellie, hiding behind crates of feed stacked high for makeshift cover. Thaddeus raised the lantern high, its flickering light casting his silhouette across the yard. "You boys come for trouble," he called, "and you'll find it. But if you turn around right now, I'll let the coyotes be the only ones that see your backsides." The darkness answered with a cruel laugh. Then came the click of rifle bolts sliding home. "We got 10 men," the voice sneered. "You've got you and 5 little girls." "I only need 6 bullets," Thaddeus replied. A pause. Then, bang! A shot rang out, splintering the top post of the Hartwell ranch gate. Hattie screamed. Cora flinched. Then Thaddeus's voice boomed louder than the wind. "Fire! Crack!" Cora's shot rang true. One of the lanterns in the dark shattered, plunging the right flank of their attackers into blindness. Hattie followed with another. Thaddeus's rifle barked twice, then once more for good measure. Screams echoed across the yard. One man hit, another ducking for cover. And still, the enemy came. Shadows charged the porch, feet thudding like drumbeats of war. Thaddeus stood tall at the top step, eyes burning, and whispered under his breath, "Sarah, if you're watching, guide my aim." The next shot split the night in half. Thaddeus's bullet found its mark. One of the charging men, broad-shouldered, masked with a red scarf, dropped mid-stride, his rifle clattering beside him as he slammed into the dust. The rest faltered. Just for a second. Just enough. Hattie's second shot shattered the wooden hitching post by the gate, sending splinters into the legs of a man behind it. He cursed and fell. Screaming, Cora shifted her position, breath tight, eyes scanning for the next shadow. She hadn't fired again. Not yet, Thaddeus noticed. Her finger hovered over the trigger like a prayer waiting to be said. Then came the sound no one wanted to hear. A match strike, then a torch. "Thaddeus!" Lila's voice rang from the barn. "They're trying to smoke us out." Thaddeus turned. Too slow. A bottle arced through the air. Glass, rag, flame, Molotov. It hit the side of the barn, flames licking the dry wood like hungry tongues. "Damn it," he growled. Rose ran from the barn with a bucket before Thaddeus could shout for her to stay down. She tossed the water, barely slowing the blaze. "We need more," she cried. "Barrel by the corral," Thaddeus shouted. "Stay low," He turned to Cora. "Cover her! Make your shots count!" Cora nodded, jaw clenched, knuckles white on the rifle. From the dark, another voice called out. Gruffer, colder than the first. "You're delaying the inevitable, Hartwell. The girls die either way. You just get to choose whether it's quiet or loud." Thaddeus's voice was ice. "I choose loud." And he fired again. Thaddeus's shot punched through the dark with bone-breaking finality. He didn't wait to see the result. He knew the rhythm of a man dropping dead. He'd heard it too many times not to. Behind him, the flames clawed higher up the barn wall. Rose was already at the rain barrel, scooping with a dented pail. Cora, eyes narrowed, fired over her shoulder. Twice, driving the men in the tree line back. "You ever shot before today?" Thaddeus asked her. "Nope," she replied between breaths. "But I ain't letting them take my sisters." He nodded. "You've got Hartwell blood somewhere in you, girl." A flicker of movement caught his eye in the wheat field beyond the pasture. Low, fast, not running, crawling, someone circling wide. A smart one, a wolf among the coyotes. "Thaddeus," Hattie whispered from the side window. "There's someone by the back fence. They're going for the water well." Thaddeus cursed. "They're trying to cut off the barn." "They want the fire to do the killing," Cora said darkly. "Not on his watch." Thaddeus tossed her his revolver. "Keep him back from the porch. I've got a rat to smoke out." With that, he slipped into the shadows, moving fast and low around the barn's west side, his boots silent, rifle cradled like a sleeping child. The wheat swayed under starlight, a sea of gold turning to black. And then he saw him, a man hunched at the well's base, lighting another bottle. The fire kissed his face. Thaddeus's voice came like a hammer. "You light that wick, you won't see another morning." The man froze, then grinned. "I don't need a morning, Hartwell. Just a bounty." He lit the rag, and Thaddeus fired. The shot cracked through the field like a whip. The bottle dropped. Still lit, but it never hit its target. The man fell backward with a grunt, his chest blooming red. The glass shattered harmlessly in the grass, a pool of fire flickering out in the dirt. Thaddeus stepped forward, rifle still hot in his hands, and kicked the smoldering shards aside. "You boys want blood," he muttered, "but you never think about the price." Back at the barn, the fire was being beaten down. Barely. Lila and Rose had formed a bucket line to the trough, their dresses soaked, hair wild from smoke and sweat. Ellie, despite the pain in her arm, dragged a blanket through the mud and slapped it against the wall. And Cora was holding the porch like a sentry born for war. The Colt barked twice more in her hands. Each time she flinched, but her feet held steady. Thaddeus returned to the porch, his coat now singed at the cuff. "They're falling back," Hattie said from the side window. "Just shadows now, maybe regrouping." "They ain't done," Thaddeus said. "They're too greedy to leave empty-handed." He handed Cora back the Colt. "You shoot like a schoolmarm," he said, "but you stand like a ranger. That'll do." She gave a breathless laugh, then grew serious. "They'll come at us all at once next time." Thaddeus nodded grimly. "They'll hit the barn and house both. Divide and overwhelm. Only way to stop 'em," he looked to the ridge, "is to make them think they've already lost." "How?" Hattie asked. Thaddeus looked to the flames licking low against the barn. "We make this place look like it's already burned." "Burn our own branch?" Hattie whispered, her voice tight with disbelief. "You're serious?" Thaddeus didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped off the porch and kicked over the lantern near the fence line, sending flames licking along the dry grass. He turned to Cora and Hattie, his face etched with years of grit and grief. "We don't burn it all, just enough to make 'em think they did the job themselves." "But the barn!" Rose called from the back. Thaddeus pointed toward the fire-blackened side. "That wall's scorched, smoke's thick. From the ridge it'll look gutted. We douse the flames, leave the char, and pull back into the shadows." He motioned toward the old cellar hatch beneath the cabin's rear porch, long forgotten, mostly buried, but still intact. "I built that cellar before the war," he said. "Stone-lined, stays cool in summer. It's not big, but it'll hold us. Long enough for them to come, think we're ash, and ride off." "And if they search?" Cora asked. Thaddeus's gaze darkened. Then we don't hide. We ambush. The plan was madness. But out here, on the high mesa, where law traveled slower than rumor and justice came with a bullet, madness was sometimes the only rope that kept you alive. They moved quickly. Blankets soaked, flames smothered, walls darkened with soot. They broke windows, scattered feed, tossed Pike's body outside like it had been dragged from the fight. By the time the girls climbed into the cellar, bruised and breathless, the ranch looked like it had weathered a siege. Thaddeus was the last one in. As he pulled the hatch closed, his hand hesitated. Out across the field, torches flickered again. Closer this time. So close, he could see the sneer on the lead rider's face. The cellar was dark, thick with earth, damp with memory. Thaddeus crouched low near the slatted vent beneath the porch, his rifle balanced across his knees. Cora and Hattie sat beside him, eyes wide, ears straining. The younger girls huddled farther back, breath shallow, hands clenched. Above them, boots crunched over charred earth. The riders had arrived. Voices filtered through the vent, muffled by smoke and dust. Hell of a mess. Pike said he'd handle it. He handled a bullet, from the looks of it. Laughter. Dry. Cruel. Thaddeus closed his eyes briefly, letting the cadence of their words settle into his bones. He counted at least 6, maybe more. One voice louder than the rest. Confident. Commanding. Then came the sound of dismounts. Boots hit dirt. Closer. Check the barn, the leader ordered. I want bodies. Cora tensed. Thaddeus touched her arm. Just once. Steady. Footsteps moved overhead. Boards creaked. Dust sifted down from between the cellar planks. A shadow paused at the hatch. Clunk. The latch rattled, locked from below. Then a grunt. A curse. Too much rubble, someone muttered. Doors half sunken. If they're down there, they're dead already. Good, said the leader. That means we ride back light. A silence fell. Thaddeus held his breath. Then, the unmistakable sound of a match striking. A torch flared. They weren't satisfied. They meant to burn the rest. Smoke curled through the vent. Ellie whimpered. And Thaddeus knew they had 2 choices. Burn. Or fight. He looked to Cora. You ready to raise hell, girl? She nodded. And Thaddeus smiled. Let's remind these bastards what a Hartwell war looks like. Thaddeus's hand moved fast. He passed Cora the Colt, then turned to Hattie, handing her a small pouch. Black powder. Dump it along the vent edge. When I give the word, light it. She blinked. Won't that blow the porch? He nodded. Exactly. You want to stop a devil from knocking? You break the damn door. Above them, boots thudded back and forth, and more voices gathered near the barn. One man laughed. We'll burn it proper now. Boss'll want proof. Scorched bones. That was it. Thaddeus whispered. Now. Hattie struck the match with shaking hands, set it to the powder. A heartbeat. 2. Boom! The porch exploded upward with a thunderous roar, wooden boards shattering skyward in a halo of smoke and splinters. Shouts echoed above. Panic and surprise tangled in the night air. Before the dust could settle, Thaddeus leapt from the hatch like a ghost risen for vengeance. Rifle to his shoulder. One shot. Then another. 2 riders dropped where they stood. Cora scrambled up after him, firing toward the barn. Hattie behind her, clutching a kitchen knife with both hands, wild-eyed and fearless. The men scattered. One reached for his rifle. Thaddeus's bullet sent it flying. Another tried to run, tripped over Pike's body and fell with a scream. Smoke billowed from the barn again, but this time it wasn't fear that filled the Hartwell ranch yard. It was fury. Rose and Lila burst from the side door, wielding boards like war clubs. The youngest, Ellie, still bleeding, stood in the barn loft, dropping buckets of smoldering straw on any man too slow to move. Thaddeus called out, voice thundering, "This is Hartwell land, and Hartwell law says you don't touch what ain't yours." The last man standing dropped his weapon and ran. The last man fled down the trail, tripping over himself, leaving behind his rifle and his pride. His shouts faded into the canyon wind, swallowed by the night. Thaddeus stood at the center of the yard, rifle still smoking, heart thudding like war drums. Around him, the girls gathered one by one, Dusty, bruised, streaked with ash, but alive. Cora lowered the Colt, her hands shaking now that the fight was over. She looked to Thaddeus. "You think that was the last of them?" Thaddeus scanned the hills, watching the shadows. "No, but they'll think twice now. They didn't come looking for a war. They came for a bounty, and they left with corpses." Lila wiped soot from her face. "What do we do now?" Thaddeus didn't answer right away. His eyes landed on the barn, smoke curling from the roof, flames finally dying. One side had collapsed inward, half the feed was gone. A corner of the fence smoldered. But the ranch still stood. He turned to Cora. "How many saw Pike's face before he came here?" "Just one," she said. "A telegraph operator in Winslow. He's the one that warned us. Said Pike was asking around about 5 sisters." Thaddeus nodded. "Then, word's already out. More might come." "We run?" Hattie asked, her voice tight. Thaddeus looked to the barn, then to the dark horizon. "No, we dig in. We write the story ourselves, not let others write it for us." "And if they send more?" Cora asked. Thaddeus smiled grimly. "Then we show them what 5 girls and an old rancher can do when cornered." Above them, the moon rose red as blood. A warning. Or a promise. The blood moon hung like a burning eye over Hartwell Ranch. As Thaddeus gathered the girls around the smoldering porch, they were tired, bruised, and blackened with smoke. But they stood tall. "You said your pa had evidence," Thaddeus began, voice slow and steady. "Names. Dates. Things men would kill to keep buried." Cora nodded. "He kept it in a journal. Leather-bound, red thread binding. It's hidden." "Where?" She hesitated, glancing at her sisters. Then, with a sigh, "Saddle of the old mule we left in Sand Hollow. Thought we'd circle back when it was safe. That plan's gone to hell." Thaddeus nodded slowly. "Then we make it safe." Hattie leaned in. "You want to go back for it?" "I want to end this," he said, eyes gleaming. "We can't live like foxes in a burnin' den forever. We take the fight to them. And if we die?" Rose whispered. Thaddeus looked to Ellie, who stood pale and bandaged, holding her sister's hand. "Then, we die standing, not hiding." The wind picked up, warm and dry, sweeping ash from the yard into the prairie. Coyotes howled in the distance. The land was watching. Cora stepped forward and held out her hand. "Thaddeus Hartwell," she said, "you saved our lives. That makes you family now." He looked at her, eyes heavy with memory, then took her hand. "No," he said, "you girls saved mine." They clasped hands, a pact made not by blood but by fire. And under that blood moon, they became something more than hunted girls and a grieving rancher. They became a reckoning. By morning, the ranch was quiet, burnt, bruised, but breathing. Thaddeus saddled his horse before sunrise, tightening the cinch with the practiced hands of a man who hadn't ridden hard in years. Cora stepped up beside him, rifle slung across her back. "You really going alone?" she asked. He shook his head. "You're coming with me. The rest stay and guard the ranch." Hattie, Rose, and Lila stood nearby, watching silently. Ellie sat on the porch, arm in a sling, eyes still puffy but sharp. They all understood. What they carried in Sand Hollow wasn't just a journal. It was war. "You're sure it's still there?" Thaddeus asked as they rode out. Cora nodded. "I hid it in the saddle lining, stitched it myself. Even if someone stole the mule, they wouldn't find it unless they cut it open." They rode hard across open country, the land unspooling before them like a prayer on the wind. Red rock bluffs rose to the west, the sky a pale fire overhead. Coyotes scattered, crows circled. The world seemed to hold its breath. By dusk, they saw it. Sand Hollow. What had once been a quiet way station now lay abandoned. Buildings half collapsed, doors swinging in the breeze. Dust rolled through empty streets like ghosts. The mule was gone, but its tracks, hooved, unhurried, led toward the edge of town, into the arid brush. Thaddeus crouched low, studying the trail. Too clean. Someone's still out there. Cora reached for her rifle. Then came a voice from the ridge. "Hartwell, that you?" A man stood there, lean, sharp-faced with a Union saber at his side. Thaddeus froze. "I know that voice," he muttered. Cora narrowed her eyes. "Friend or foe?" Thaddeus's jaw tightened. Both. The man on the ridge descended slow, like a preacher approaching a sinner. Dust clung to his boots, and the saber at his hip clanked against his thigh with each step. "Name's Roland Trask," Cora whispered, her eyes scanning him. "That's the name Pike mentioned when he first came sniffing around. Said he answered to Trask." Thaddeus spat. "Course he does. Trask and I," he tapped his chest. "We used to wear the same colors, same regiment, till he sold his loyalty for silver." Roland stopped 10 paces away. His face bore the marks of old war and new wealth. A jagged scar cut across his chin. His eyes were calm, but cold. "Thaddeus Hartwell," he said, voice like rusted iron. "Didn't think you'd still be breathing. Heard you buried yourself with that wife of yours." "You here for the girl or the journal?" Thaddeus asked flatly. Roland chuckled. "Girl's a bonus. The book's what gets men hanged. Important men. Powerful ones." He drew his saber. Slow, theatrical. Cora raised her rifle. "You take one more step and I swear." Roland smirked. "Easy, girl. This is between ghosts." Thaddeus stepped forward, hands empty. "You were there, in Silver Basin. You helped clear that land. Burned out families, shot fathers in the back." Roland shrugged. "Progress has a price." Thaddeus's eyes narrowed. "And now you're the one paying." With a shout, he lunged. Not for a gun, but for the short blade at his boot. The saber swung down. Clang! Steel met steel in a burst of sparks. Cora fired. Roland ducked. The ridge lit with gunfire. They weren't alone. Gunfire roared across the ridge like a thunderclap torn from heaven. Cora dropped to one knee, reloading as bullets punched the dirt around her. Thaddeus grappled with Roland, the saber flashing, his own blade gripped tight in calloused hands. "You always did fight like a preacher," Roland sneered, trying to twist the saber into Thaddeus's ribs. "And you always talked too much," Thaddeus growled, slamming his forehead into Roland's nose with a sickening crunch. Roland staggered back, blood pouring, just as Cora fired again, her shot slicing across the shoulder of a second rider emerging from the brush. The man howled, fell back, disappeared into the thorns. More hooves thundered. 3 riders remained. No time to run. Thaddeus snatched Roland's fallen saber and turned toward the oncoming riders. "Cora, cover the trail. I'll handle the gate." She nodded, moved like fire, and disappeared into the underbrush, eyes scanning for the stolen mule and the hidden journal. Thaddeus stood in the open, saber in one hand, rifle in the other, daring the riders to break formation. The first charged hard. Pistol raised. Thaddeus didn't shoot. He threw the saber. The blade spun end over end, silver against sun, and caught the rider square in the chest. Horse and man collapsed in a heap. Another rider turned to flee. The last kept coming, rage blinding him. Thaddeus raised his rifle, slow, steady, and ended it. Roland groaned behind him, crawling for his revolver. Cora emerged, blood on her cheek, clutching something wrapped in leather and red thread. "I found it," she said. Thaddeus looked at the dying sun and the trail home. "Good," he said. "Then it's time to burn the lies down." They buried the bodies shallow and fast, under stones that would be scattered by the next good wind. No time for sermons. No time for rest. Thaddeus wrapped Roland's saber in cloth and slung it across his saddle. Cora tied the red-threaded journal tight to her chest, like it was stitched to her heartbeat. They rode through the night. By dawn, Hartwell Ranch lay ahead, scarred, battered, but still standing. The girls ran out to meet them, eyes wide with questions, hearts still beating with disbelief. Hattie grabbed Cora's shoulders. "You found it?" Cora nodded, unwrapping the bundle. Thaddeus stepped beside her, watching as they opened the journal. Inside, hand-drawn maps, train schedules, names scrawled in spidery ink, governors, bankers, railroad magnates, every one of them tied to Silver Basin, to the killings, to the blood buried beneath polished boots. "It's all here," Cora whispered. "Everything they killed for." Thaddeus's eyes darkened. "This isn't a book, it's a gallows." "And who do we give it to?" Rose asked. Thaddeus turned toward the horizon. "No one in this territory. The law's bought and buried." Lila stepped forward. "Then what do we do?" Thaddeus looked around at the ranch, at the girls who had stood against fire and death and refused to kneel. He drew in a long breath. "We ride to the capital. Bring it to the newspapers, print the truth, let the world judge them." Cora stared at the sunrise, its gold spilling over the mesa like fire and hope in one breath. "They'll come after us," she said softly. "They already did," Thaddeus replied. "Now it's our turn." The wind picked up, and the riders began to saddle. They left Hartwell Ranch before the sun had cleared the ridge, the red-threaded journal wrapped tight in oilskin, packed deep in Cora's satchel. Thaddeus rode at the front, the girls flanking him in a staggered column like cavalry, not fugitives now, but bearers of fire. The road to the capital was long and cruel, stitched with outlaw hideouts, corrupt deputies, and dust devils that danced like omens. But they rode steady, their names whispered ahead of them like a prophecy. By the third night, they reached Gallows Pass, a canyon town crawling with lawmen who tipped their hats too easily. Thaddeus dismounted slow, rifle slung, and walked straight into the telegraph station. "To the Denver Tribune," he told the clerk. "Message, proof of federal corruption and murder in Silver Basin. Names included. Riders en route with evidence. Prepare to print." The clerk stared, then nodded. By the fifth night, news had already reached ahead of them. They weren't hunted anymore. They were expected. When they arrived at the capital's edge, lanterns lit the street. Reporters swarmed. Pinkertons watched from rooftops, hands twitching near pistols. But they didn't fire. Not this time. Because the moment Cora handed that journal to the editor of the Tribune, the ground shifted. Names spilled like thunder. Within a month, 6 senators resigned. Within 2, 3 rail barons faced charges. And within the year, a statue stood at the center of Silver Basin, not of a governor or a tycoon, but of 5 sisters and an old man, standing with rifles raised, not in anger, but in truth. And Thaddeus Hartwell? He disappeared like the last echo of a gunshot. Some say to New Mexico, others say to the mountains. But those who rode with him, they knew. He'd already carved his legend, not in blood, but in justice.